Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. I wanted to show you my new Makita electric sharpener. It's a model 9820-2. I found this thing after looking online, looking at YouTube, all kinds of different ways that people were sharpening their tools, chisels, plane irons, all kinds of blades and sharp types of cutters, like plane irons, actual planer blades, joiner knives, and I was trying to figure out what I would want to do, and I needed something that was quick, reliable, accurate, precise, and very repeatable. And after stumbling across the video series by Ask Woodman, I was really intrigued by this machine, and I went and picked one up. I found this machine on the local classified online ads, and it's pretty beat up. It came from a music school at the University of Utah. Kid got it after tuning up some bandsaws, and this was his payment, I guess, and he turned it into cash because I gave him 50 bucks for the machine, which I thought was a good steal, until I brought it home and realized all the condition issues it had. So right off the bat, you can tell it's pretty dirty, but you know, they get really, really dirty because these stones, once they get wet and you start to actually create some of that watery, milky, you know, stony material that is created when you put a plane iron on it or something, it's really, really messy. And the best way to sharpen with this is to have a plastic bag wrapped around your chest with a couple of holes in it, so you don't ruin your shirt. Obviously, I'm wearing a shirt that's torn up and tattered, has some holes in it, because I really don't want to get any of this stuff on me. It will not come out of your clothes. I learned that from Ask Woodman again. So I'll show you how it comes apart really quickly, and maybe some of the things I did to restore it to get it in the condition it is now, where it's actually operational. So obviously the water tank comes out. There were no problems with it other than it's super dirty. And the actual slider here, it's in good shape. It's missing one of the screws, but it's in good shape, but it was a little rusty. So I cleaned that up as much as I could. I oiled it down so that it's nice and smooth and slides really easily. And let me pull this out here. It's a little tight, but that's actually not a bad thing for me. So here's a stone. It's a 1,000 grit stone, and if I could find the right Allen wrench, I don't know what I did with the other one. I'll pull it off so you can see sort of the insides of it. And this is a 1,000 grit stone, and I got several other stones with this sharpener. Look at this. I got all these stones. A kid just threw them in. And then this green grinding wheel, but it doesn't have a base. But I think what I'll do is probably steal one from one of these 1,000 grit stones. I have 3 of those, and there's no way in my entire lifetime I'm going to use all 3. Especially the one that's really in the worst shape and probably the thinnest of the 3. It's pretty far out of true and flat and level. And the base is pretty nasty, so I'll probably sort of try to chip that off there somehow, and then epoxy that on, or maybe silicone it so that it's on there, and try to mess around with that for grinding things that really don't need as need a much coarser grinding on it to take off more material. So I got another 1,000 grit, and then I got this 6,000. I actually got 2 of them, and I was talking to my friend Alan Little from Ask Woodman channel, and he was saying he'd never seen one of these 6,000 grit stones. He'd love to see one, and I said, well, I've got 2. I'll probably never go through both of them. And so what I did was I sent him the worst of the 2. And what I mean by the worst is there was just a nasty U-shaped groove in the middle of the stone. Somebody had just basically taken tools and gone right down the middle, and never gone across it. So it was really, really uneven and warped. Is that convex? Probably convex. And so I sent one to Alan Little. He's going to be making a video about how to true that up, and I'll do the same. And it'll be interesting to see how we both did that and went through that process, but probably a little differently. So I'll show you my setup for that later in a different video, but that's what's going to happen next. So here's the little plastic, riser. It comes up depending on the height of your stone to keep water from flipping out, and then obviously the inside. So I did take epoxy and epoxy some of the areas that look cracked, but most of the restoration, if you will, happened on the bottom. This bracket here that holds the motor to the actual unit was rusted through, and I used a product called, what is it called? It's this stuff, Evapo Rust. You can pick it up for like 33, 34 bucks a gallon. Reusable, non-corrosive, awesome product for getting rid of rust. I use it for everything. And you can use it over and over until the stuff turns black. It's beautiful. So I basically took the whole thing apart, and the reason I did that is so I could remove this, get it rust free, and then paint it over with a primer. And also, I got in here because, as you can tell, these are not the original screws. The original screws are these that go in there to hold this pin down so that you can adjust the height of the slider, right? But if that doesn't work, then the slider could come up or down or move around, and then you wouldn't get accurate results, which is one of the reasons I wanted this machine. So I had to basically epoxy some nuts inside there in place, and then take these wing nuts and put it through. And it's worked quite well. The only issue is you got to be really careful not to over tighten it, or you'll develop these stress cracks, because it's really just plastic pushing on plastic, and when I got it, it was already cracked. I tried to fix them as best I could with some more epoxy, but it's inevitable with this body, just the design of it, that's how it is. And somebody had just over cranked it, and it's a very common issue with these. So when you get one, if you get one, make sure you look at that, and you'll probably see cracks, but if they've been repaired, and if these actual screws hold the pins in place, then you're probably okay. But in my case, I felt like I had to be a little bit more creative in solving that issue. The other problem was that I think the underside, the undercarriage, was so rusted through, and it still is, but I don't really care about a little surface rust. The reason it was so rusted is, one, it was not cared for, but two, is they didn't have the plastic tubing that actually drains the water away. So with this bucket, it's got water in it. The whole time water's dripping out and down through here, and it's actually kicking the water up underneath, which that's not very awesome if you're using an electric motor. While it's running, you have water going through there. I mean, you get the idea, right? That's dangerous. Also caused a lot of rust. So I went and picked up some tube from the local big box store, and at first I was kind of annoyed that they didn't have a shorter piece. All I wanted was 6 inches. I thought I just wanted something to drain out. But now I'm really glad that they only sold it in this, 20-foot length. I don't need 20 feet, maybe 6 or 8 feet. But I think I'll leave it in about a 8 or 9 foot length, so I can actually put it through here and then drain it into a bucket. I'll uncoil this, put it in a bucket, and then that way all the water's contained and should be draining through into the bucket. When I'm done, I'll just dump the bucket out, clean the machine, and we're good to go. So it actually worked out better with the long tubing. I didn't think about it before. The tube itself was like $3 or $4, but that's going to work wonders for trying to keep this thing as clean as possible, because it's a super messy machine, but it's awesome for sharpening with. So I'll show you how it goes back together real quick. Let's take this 6,000 grit stone, because we're going to be truing that up. Actually, let's take this 1,000. Put it on there, just like this. Okay? And you got to make sure you get that little knob right in the groove there. So you kind of just mess around with it till it gets in there. And then this, this is not the way it came from the factory, I'm certain. But you know what? It seems to work for holding down the stones, but it's not ideal. So maybe I'll figure out a better, quicker way of doing this. But for now, this is kind of the hokey little way that I've got to do this. So Once we're tight, you don't need to over tighten it. Don't go crazy. Just give it a nice snug. Then we've got this little riser that comes up like that, the splash guard, and it doesn't come up too high. So if the stone's pretty new, you know, obviously it's not going to come up to the edge. And then you have the water tank here, and then you have your slider. And I don't know what it's really called. I'm just calling it a slider. If that's the wrong name, then, you know, I can live with that. So I'll have the tube here. So this is the complete setup here, now that you're seeing it. And these screws here, I'll tighten them, and it'll lock these in place so they can't come up when I'm using the machine, and they work really well. You don't need to tighten them hardly at all. Just barely snug them up. Otherwise you'll crack the body. And you put your plain iron in there, and you take it across the surface of the rock there while water's coming through, build up a little bit of slurry, run it across, you get a really nice result. And if you want even finer, you go down to the 6,000. So that's the Makita 9820-2. If you can pick one up used for 50 bucks like I did with 4 or 5 stones, it's a killer deal. I think they sell for around 350 bucks on Amazon. It's a lot of money for the average guy in a hobby shop for a tool sharpener. But if you can pick one up used, I think it's a great deal. Otherwise, you might have to stick to the DMT stones or other water stones. Thanks for watching. We'll see ya.